So actually, I'm going to hand it off to Martin. We're doing a new thing where we just switch off each week. So it's Martin's week.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, welcome to the weekly analytics call. So Dan and I talked a little bit about the content of our weekly call, and we figured we would like to try a few new things. One of the things that we figured might be interesting, besides the demo part that we usually have on our agenda, is that we wanted to give opportunity to everyone to talk about interesting problems or solutions that might be that could be relevant for others as well. It doesn't have to be like a new component or a new feature. It could also be like any sort of technical problem that you've been working on and you wanted to talk about, or some design that you wanted to share. So anything that you can think of. It doesn't have to be technical. Doesn't have to be a technical problem. It can also be like a new feature that came to your mind during the last couple of days. So anything worth interesting would be great if you could share that with the team. The other thing that we thought might also be interesting to everyone, since we already have the new on deck label or are using it in our team, would be to have a dedicated section on a weekly basis in our agenda to give mainly product or John Mason the opportunity to maybe share some interesting on deck label issues with the team. So doesn't have to be today, but maybe that's something that we can start beginning next week, since we haven't talked about this yet, but just wanted to introduce this idea to everyone. So to give like a forecast of potential issues that we probably have to expect in the next milestone. We have obviously we already have a bunch of issues labeled with on deck, but it would be cool to have like a brief overview of some of those issues and get a better understanding what those issues are about, and so everyone can dig into those issues after the call if they seem interesting. So maybe that's something that would be on your agenda in the future, John Mason, if that makes sense to you. Dan and I just talked about this idea last week, and I'm curious how everyone else on the team thinks about this agenda item, so we can get a better understanding of on deck issues. And they don't have to be like explained in too much detail, but to get like a brief overview. Yeah, I think I haven't really. Those are the things I can recall from the meeting I had with Dan last week. I didn't really follow the agenda this time, so I was just jumping back and forth. Sorry about that. But those are the main two topics that I wanted to highlight today. The other thing that I can find on the agenda is the number of issues that we have in the state workflow scheduling. Dan, is that something you wanted to talk about? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so this was an idea that John Mason had. So right now the number's 27 that are open. So we can just pop that in there. 27. So basically it's just a way, and maybe John Mason can elaborate if he wants, but my understanding was that this is a way for us to just kind of track that we do have some work that's currently the attention of refinement efforts.
Right. Yeah. Part of what I really want to do is help kind of increase the strategic density of what we deliver every month. You know, you can eat calories, but they're not all nutritious. Same thing. We could produce a lot of work, but you know, with time and attention, the work that we produce will have greater and greater impact. in the marketplace on our customers, and we'll start to see that as usage will start to ramp and so on. And part of increasing the kind of strategic density is having the time, good stuff prepared that we have a lot of good research on. Customers have already expressed an interest in using that feature as soon as it rolls off the end of the assembly line and so on. And so that also has to do with having enough stuff that we can make good decisions and say, well, this item is it's got a better strategic density profile than this other one, so this is the one we're going to kind of pull in. And so having a couple releases worth of backlog that's really solid and ready to go is will help us increase that strategic density over time.
Cool. Yeah, the other thing, instead of walking the board, we figured it might be a good idea to maybe just talk a little bit every week about current blockers that anyone is experiencing. So it seems like nobody has added anything to the agenda under this item. So I wonder, are there any blockers that we should talk about this week, or should we skip it for this week?
I think I can move the item here around the visually depict value stream as a flow up to there, because that's sort of defined as a blocker, I imagine. So I think there are a few sort of asynchronous comments within this issue.
Is that about removing the table or the vertical?
So,
okay.
So this is the value stream one, and initially within the description, the idea was to basically keep the vertical tabs or boxes or whatever they are there while we put the horizontal value stream in, and sort of just have that as the minimum viable change. However, upon reflecting on it and with the new designs, I think the approach of keeping them both there is not a viable one and will lead to a lot more confusion than it's worth. So my question here is it worthwhile hiding this behind a feature flag? And then Brandon basically posed this question to John Mason, because this could basically impact the direction that we talked about. So I'll open it up on the table. My perspective is, I think we should hide it behind a feature flag, because showing both the same things at the same time will lead to more confusion than it's worth. Does anyone else have any other perspectives?
I think. Sorry. I guess feature flag makes sense to me, in my opinion, mainly because, from my understanding, both controls would be kind of redundant, right? So you would have the same control, well, you would have different controls doing pretty much the same thing, right? So you would have the ability to reorder stuff from both controls, and then it also adds additional overhead, like technical overhead, since if you want to, like if you use drag and drop on one part, like on the horizontal stage control, then you would make sure to also sync the other component to make sure that the state of the stages is accurate. And the question is, does it add any value having both controls displayed at the same time? Or, as you said, I guess it's causing more confusion than it's doing any good. So I like the idea of having a feature flag.
Did we do some kind of informal user research that gave us that feedback, or what, or is it just that's our own observations about the feature?
It's working with the design and creating the design and to implement the path alongside it. I came to the realization, but happy to do the sort of quick and dirty research with people around the team, if you feel that's necessary.
Well, my initial thought about it was that we're talking about a pretty significant element of the page all of a sudden jumping from one place to another. And there's no, we kind of without warning. Whereas if we had both of them there, the user could sort of get used to the fact that this is going to be moving up here and, get used to it over time. Now, we may not have enough usage that really matters that much, to be honest. But that was at least our original thinking about it.
It would be cool to have some sort of A/B testing in place, but I think we don't really have a setup for this, and this is like a problem that affects almost every area on GitLab.com. But in my opinion, this would be a perfect use case for an A/B test where we can figure out which control is more intuitive or is better, is easier to use for users.
Yeah, and maybe even we make it kind of user selectable at some point. That, hey, would you like to try our new experience? And they can do a toggle to kind of flip from one experience to the other.
I guess the good thing about the feature flag is we could enable it for particular groups. So we would have it enabled for the GitLab org group, while other groups would still have the old control or the old UI in place. So this is some sort of A/B test within different groups, but still it enables us to get some sort of user feedback without rolling out the feature to everyone.
Yeah,
I like that. And by dog fooding and using the feature flag just to share it with GitLabbers or GitLab team members, I think that's a very good way to sort of start testing it out in real life rather than just showing some screenshots and reflecting on some questions. I think that's a good idea.
Makes sense.
Cool. So agreeing that we hide it behind a feature flag, but reveal it for GitLab team members and dog food it with GitLab team members to get some feedback from them. Cool.
Sounds good to me. Does that make sense, Brenton? Yeah. Cool. All right. Next item would be on Dec Issues, but this is a fairly new item as we just talked about. So, John Mason, do you have anything top of your head that you want to talk about about current on Dec Issues, or should we just skip it for this week and start talking about on Dec Issues next week?
I can give a brief pass through of some stuff that I've been working on, and then we'll do it even better next week.
Sweet.
All right, let me share screen here. All right, so we've been working on some adjustments to the to-do APIs, and the next step in that is actually to help us distinguish which action resulted in the closure of an API. This one's had very active conversation as we're trying to figure out what the new fields we want to add to to-dos to understand what action actually resulted in its closure, who closed them, and so on. And that's important because we're trying to tease out what the user was really trying to do. Were they overwhelmed with just the number of to-dos that they had, and or were they did they find that a to-do just had nothing in it to do and it was kind of noise, and so on. So you may be participating in this conversation. If not, it's happening here. Another significant issue that we've been working on is this epic for a generics and metrics API. This is pretty long, but it describes an API for all kinds of aggregated metrics that could come from issues or MRs. It could come from tests or builds or a variety of things, and should allow us to make it much easier in the front end to have one set of front end controls allow you to display any kind of chart. One of the things that Dan asked about with this item is if we couldn't provide some more use cases. And Nick has provided a nice image here of one example use case of how this API would be used. The other thing that I've been doing is spending some time with our Insights product and looking at how would, if we were to migrate all of Insights to this new API system, how would it work? And so I spun up a new epic to sort of explore that question here called Migrate Insights generic to the generic APIs in UI, to explain sort of what would it look like if we use this generic API for all of Insights. And I tried to tease out here sort of what kinds of controls in Insights today that are controlled by configuration attributes in the Insights YML file, how they get reflected in either the dataset definition API or a background aggregator, or wind up being sort of a front end control. And in order to help us explore that question, I produced this PDF that goes through each of the Insights charts that we have configured today in the at the group GitLab group level, and then showed what the YML to configure that particular chart was, so that you can sort of see some very specific examples of how that aggregation could work. So all of the attributes in these YML snippets then are described here in this table to sort of explain kind of how that would work. So I don't think we've completely answered the question that Dane has about examples, but we're moving towards having more examples that would help us understand our approach to this generic metrics API, and then we'll start carving it into little pieces where we can actually implement a whole piece. The other thing I want to say about this migrating Insights to generic APIs in UI is don't interpret the existence of this epic to indicate anything about the priority of migrating all of Insights to these new APIs. It's not intended to imply anything about that. What it's intended to do is explore that API and the work to create it so that we are we're providing a good underpinning for everything else that we might do in in analytics. All right. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Martin.
Cool. Thanks, John Mosen. Yeah, the next thing, speaking of interesting problems and solutions, I'll hand it over to Dan. Not sure if you have two items there. You want to talk about the test by type chart, or I can also demo it if you want to.
I was just hoping somebody could demo it because we've been working on it for so long and it's so cool.
Cool. I'll just share my screen real quick. I think it should be enabled on gitlab.com already. So just need to make sure that it's on by default, but I think it should be, sorry. Under value stream analytics, let's select the project. Okay. Yep, there it is. So I'm not super familiar with all the data that we're showing in the chart yet, but yeah. So the chart is here. We get a bar chart that indicates or that shows us the tasks by type, and based on our current selection for the project and the time frame. And yeah, we can see that for particular dates, you get the type of issue that those tasks are relate to. So on this particular date, we can see, if I'm interpreting this right, we had 150 tasks in total, where six out of those 150 were UX tasks, 15 were front-end tasks, 19 were back-end tasks, and so on. So it's a breakdown of tasks by type for a particular date. And obviously this should also work with our time frame filter. So I'm guessing if you just change this to a different date, then we should see this being updated accordingly. So yeah, looks good to me. I guess we also have, oh yeah, here we have the ability to also select or filter out those tasks by particular labels. So let's, for example, just filter by front-end label. I guess we need to change the time frame again to have more data in there. Okay, so let's try this again. I think front-end is already one of the selected ones, so we should probably add a different item there. So for example, if we include Webpack now, we should see Webpack being included in the charts, but I think, yeah, there we have a Webpack issue, or task, basically. And I think we can also switch this from issues to merge requests. Instead of showing the chart for issues, we can toggle this and get the merge requests that have the relevant labels assigned to. So overall, I think this is a pretty cool feature, which has like, or at least allows customers to use it in many different ways by switching the toggle from issues to merge requests and applying different filters, different labels to it. Yeah. And this is already in production, and I think it should be enabled by default in this milestone. So thanks to, I think, mostly Adam and I believe Ezekiel who worked on this. Cool.
Thanks a lot for sharing.
Yeah. The next one is also for Dan, I believe.
Yeah, that was really fun to see. This kind of ended up in this section. I don't know if it really belongs here, which is about, this is actually sort of an announcement for backend, which is self-assignment of P3 and P4 issues. So P1s and P2s are still getting assigned directly. But Adam, I think you're the only backender on the call at the moment. So just, when you don't have P1 or P2 work, then just go ahead and self-assign your stuff P3 and P4, which I think you were already doing. So no surprises there. And then Nick, hand it off to you.
Yeah, I wanted to say big thanks to Brandon on working on the path component. It's looking amazing right now. It's in MR review as we speak. And thank you for tolerating my designer nitpickiness and helping push it across the line without getting too angry at me. So it looks amazing. I was wondering whether you could give it a quick demo to show everyone else.
Cool, no problem. I was gonna do a demo next week, obviously because review can change a lot of things right now with the architecture on the front end, but it shouldn't change anything visually. So yeah, I'll quickly share my screen. Let's see what we got. So yeah, this is the merge request itself. But I'll just actually show you what I've got in the storybook for GitLab UI. Here's the component. Basically, it will just receive an array of objects for what needs to be passed through to it. It is theme-based, so that can be set as well if we do decide to change the theme or have that completely user configurable. Yeah, it's mobile responsive already in the initial version. So you can see item number 10 just popped up. On a smaller screen, it should then nicely scroll between the items. Actually make that even smaller. Yeah, and it should scroll quite nicely between them as well. So like here, with the fourth item, that'll become the first item then because it was partially invisible. Yeah, thanks to Nick for all of that information on how to really set that off. I think it works super well. And yeah, the back and forth was good. CSS is definitely not my strongest point, so it was a little intimidating taking this one on, but yeah, quite happy with the final outcome there.
That looks really cool. I have one question. Did we consider, because this also affects this custom stages, right? So we would also have custom stages to appear in the horizontal navigations, so to say. So what would happen if like a customer has like a really long name with like 400 characters for some reason? Are we going to truncate that at some point, or what's the idea behind this?
Yes, that's a very good point. I haven't yet handled anything like the truncation or adding metrics to it or custom icons or anything, just for the MVC right now to display the title, but it's a very good point to handle truncation on long names, especially because yeah, we still got to add the sorting and everything like that. So yeah, definitely a great idea to add that as a follow-up item.
Cool, sounds great. Yeah, I guess we can always, like, if we need to truncate it, we can always display the full name in a tooltip or something like that. That makes sense. that looks really nice. Can't wait to see it on Value Stream Analytics, being the component being in use.
And it's great that we also make the time to work on components for pajamas as well, because from a lot of the teams that I've been speaking to, they're currently just constantly accelerating and not taking the time to contribute towards the design system, which in the end is just adding to more UX debt. So really appreciate that our team is prioritizing this sort of stuff.
Cool. I guess we're out of time, or almost already over time. So if there's nothing else anyone wants to talk about, then let's wrap it up and wish everyone a good rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.